Roll sound.
1-4 shot, 1 take 3.
Gallipoli. The power of 10.
We have to hold this trace. Come on, boys!
On this soil, legends were created.
The power of 10 is very special to me. Something that was very important to the whole team involved with this project was being absolutely accurate and authentic in the way that we told these men's stories.
For the first time, we're showing what it was really like. It's just like the real thing. Look, you sand in my shoe? Love it.
All of the extras and the actors and a number of the stuntmen were hanging around.
Hey, boys.
And I thought it was important that I try to impress on them why we were making it.
What you do in your jobs on the set here is what kids are going to watch so they can make the connection, understand what those blokes did and what they were about as men and soldiers and Australians. So to me, it means a great deal that we get this right.
We constructed over 150 metres squared, roughly, of the Lone Pine trenches.
Your world is defined by these walls and that strip of sky. That's all you had. That's all you saw.
So obviously back in 1915, the guys didn't have the equipment that we had. They were using shovels and picks. And in that space was where 7 Victoria Crosses were awarded. That's why we focused on that particular area of the Lone Pine battle.
I've now reached the ripe old age of 92 and I'm still with it, if you know what that means.
Absolutely.
Ah, good.
We went to great lengths to find the family members of each of the recipients.
This young man from Ballarat was the local hero.
Something that obviously wasn't easy, but there was a lot of research went into it, a lot of manpower.
He was an ANZAC.
He refused to give up.
And he was a hero.
We found family members that were in New Zealand. We found them in London, every state in Australia, rural communities, because obviously that's where these guys came from.
He should have been a test cricketer. Throwing them back at the Turkish attackers. He's putting his life on the line.
He's sniping at the Turks, but he's also directing the bomb throwing.
He's exposing himself to enemy fire. How did Hamilton survive? He emerges as a leader.
How's that, fellas?
A big grin on his face, a real character.
Twice, Simons would lead the rush that drove the Turks back.
It was a turning point in this battle.
I think he probably would have been quite proud about the fact that we're all remembering him now.
Rebuild it!
These men are the ones that have always been an inspiration to me, and I believe they really represent the values that are truly Australian.
I'm Ben Roberts-Smith. This is the power of 10. Saturday, August 8th, 1915, and the battle for Lone Pine was now entering its 3rd day. The trenches were packed with the dead and wounded. Many more would die waiting to be rescued. And amongst the carnage, 3 men of the 7th Battalion were about to create history.
It is a unique scenario to find 3 people awarded the Victoria Cross for a single action. It's unique because it illustrates the cooperation where these 3 men are working as a team.
2 of them were mates. Fred Tubb and Alexander Burton came from the same Victorian country town of Euroa.
Oh, you bugger!
Fred was a little bloke with a big personality. He was good with a gun and had a way with words. When war was declared, he was front and centre in rallying the local men to join up. And neighbour Alex Burton was one of the first in line.
You coming?
Yeah.
Good man. That's right.
Both went to Egypt for desert warfare training. And when they arrived in Gallipoli, they were in the same battalion.
That's better. Hello, I'm Frederick Harold Tubb.
And I'm Alexander Burton.
We're actually from the same town, a little town in Victoria called Euroa.
Well, I was born in Kyneton, but I've spent most of my life in Euroa. I'm actually only 22 years old.
And I'm a lieutenant. I'm 34 years of age. I first volunteered for service 10 years ago for the Light Horse Regiment.
10 years ago, I was singing in the church choir.
And we're with the 7th Battalion in the Australian Imperial Forces.
In the same battalion was 20-year-old Corporal William Dunstan. Also from Victoria, he was a delivery boy and shop assistant before the war. He had a high school sweetheart, Marjorie, and her mum didn't much rate young William.
I'm doing my best.
There was a big difference between the two families. They lived on different sides of Ballarat. The joke was that he was told that you can marry my daughter if you come back from the war with a VC. I don't think anyone goes to fight expecting to win a medal.
My name's William Dunstan, and I just turned 20. I grew up in the gold mining town of Ballarat. I left school at the age of 15. I'm a private in the Australian Imperial Forces.
Tubb, Burton, Dunstan and a handful of other men were now fighting together. They had managed to secure a small but vital section of Lone Pine Trench. Their orders were to hold at any cost.
Hey boys, build a barricade. Everyone up!
The battlefield around them is evolving. The Turkish threats are different. One minute they're under bayonet assault, the next minute they're on the receiving end of thrown hand grenades.
Turkish bombs rained down. Rifle fire swept across the open ground and into the trench. One of Tubbs' men even caught a grenade, but it went off in his face, killing him instantly. Tubb took control. He rallied his men, and in a moment of inspiration, he climbed out of the trench, fully exposing himself to the enemy, and using only his revolver, he fired at the Turks. Of the 10 men he started with, only 2 were left. His good friend, Corporal Alex Burton from Euroa, Victoria, and Corporal William Dunstan from Ballarat. Tubbs' own head had been shredded by shrapnel. But they were never going to give up. Tubb continued to fire his revolver back at the enemy, while Dunstan and Burton rebuilt the main barricade. When a bomb exploded right between them. William Dunstan was left temporarily blinded.
Can't imagine how terrifying that must have been. You know, he's already been fighting there desperately for 2 days. Suddenly he's blinded.
For Corporal Alex Burton, the news was far worse.
Burton gets badly torn about and dies.
The 3 Victorians had been the last men standing. Their devotion to duty stopped the enemy. And for that, all 3 were awarded the Victoria Cross. It was a first in Australian military history.
Tubb later writes in his diary that he can't believe he's still alive. He's wounded in many places, but he simply cannot believe he's lived through it all.
We had a ding-dong scrap. It is miraculous that I am alive. To cut a long story short, we beat the enemy this time. Once he nearly got us, we yelled and yelled. By Jove, it was some scrap.
He's shockingly shattered by all this. You can see it in the diary written in his own shaking hand. Tubb survives and goes on to the Western Front, where he's an accomplished officer, but he's badly wounded in 1917, being carried back by stretcher bearers, and he's hit by shrapnel and killed. Tragic end to a great hero.
To this day, in the little Victorian town of Euroa, the names Burton and Tubb loom large. Fred's family is still on the land.
Ben, this is the original Tubb family farm. It's been farmed by us for over 140 years now. And the farm that Fred farmed prior to going away. Fred and his brothers and sisters would have walked over here every day to head off to school, which is just about a kilometre down this direction down here.
And what do you know about Fred as a young man?
I know he's a fairly handy sportsman. I think he was a pretty tough footballer. He didn't have a lot of size about him. I suppose as a kid you think that a hero like that and someone that was as tough as he was a pretty big man, but he wasn't. He was tiny compared to a lot of us now. I've heard he was a bit of a larrikin, but that probably runs through a few generations too.
The name Burton also lives on. The family store is still in the family, still in the same location as it was 100 years ago. At the local Uniting Church, a magnificent stained glass window in memory of young Alex Burton. And then there are his descendants.
How are you? Must be Betty.
Yeah, I'm Betty. Yes,
how are you, Betty?
Marjorie,
yes,
how are you? And Marjorie, you went to Gallipoli, didn't you? What was that like for you?
Oh, it was very emotional. We spent a lot of time there. We looked in trenches where we knew Alec had been, and then we saw the big sign on the wall. We could see his name there. We knew he didn't have a grave of his own.
When you see a photo of Alec now, how does it make you feel?
Oh, very proud. Very proud to think that he was my uncle. Sometimes I just can't believe it. And then when I see you and to know that you're a VC winner too, it brings it all back. It just makes us very, very proud.
And last year, a permanent reminder of the sacrifices that Fred Tubb and Alex Burton made. In the VC Memorial Park, the two diggers together again.
On Tuesday the 9th.
William Dunstan was the only one of the three to survive the war. He was without sight for nearly 12 months and came home a reluctant hero.
He didn't talk about it at all. All the accounts that we have of what happened at Gallipoli come from the official histories, not from him personally.
Dunstan struggled. His head and body was still full of shrapnel. But here he is in June 1916, before thousands of people in Melbourne receiving his Victoria Cross.
It was a grand public occasion right in the centre of the city. Burke Street down there was the entertainment precinct of the city, all the grand buildings around. You had the Governor-General here to present him with his Victoria Cross. This young man from Ballarat was the local hero. It was an overawing occasion for him. He didn't handle it all that well. The crowds who were massing around, they were hanging out of those windows over there on that hotel. They wanted to put him on their shoulders and cheer him and carry him around. But he disappeared after the occasion, and went off and they found him in a room by himself in the Windsor Hotel over there.
Now, the VC is on display at the War Memorial in Canberra, a far cry from where Dunstan once kept it. Where did he keep the VC?
The VC was in a box under the staircase, and it wasn't something that was paraded around. It was just in this box with a few other bits of pieces.
Tubb, Burton and Dunstan made history. 3 soldiers, 3 VCs, all for the same action. And it wasn't just their devotion to duty that set them apart. From the back blocks of Victoria to the blood-soaked trenches of Gallipoli, they were there for each other. 3 men awarded the Victoria Cross for the same action.
From the uttermost ends of the earth, the New Zealanders came further than anyone to fight and die.
In the heat of battle,
Can you hear me?
communication is key.
Only really reliable way is telephones.
The communication is...
And this man kept it going.
Ran the gauntlet down this ridgeline as enemy machine gunners and snipers hunted him down.
Cyril Bassett, VC.
An ordinary man that went to war.
He's only a small man. He's clearly a man with the heart of a lion.
When the power of 10 returns. At Gallipoli, 10 VCs were awarded to ANZACs. 9 went to Australians and 1 to a New Zealander.
The first ever Victoria Cross awarded to a New Zealander would go to a man who was born and bred in Auckland. At the declaration of war, Cyril Bassett would immediately volunteer to enlist.
My name is Cyril Bassett. I'm 23, from Auckland, New Zealand, where I've been a clerk at the bank since I was 16. I've also served with the Auckland College Rifles. And so as soon as I heard about the war, I joined up.
But on his compulsory medical, the doctors would tell him, "You're too short, go away." So he did, straight to the end of the line to try again. But again, he would be rejected. On his 3rd attempt, he would be accepted. And a short time later, he would find himself landing on the beaches of Gallipoli.
August 1915, Cyril Bassett and the New Zealand Expeditionary Force were given a huge task. Capture the highest point in the entire ANZAC area. They fought through these foothills and forged up along the ridgelines. The Turks were armed with big artillery guns and they controlled the peak of Chunuk Bair. For the Kiwis, taking this key strategic territory was a monumental challenge. Colonel William Malone was in charge of coordinating the assault.
We'll be there shortly. Hang in there.
He was providing vital information and organising support from battalion headquarters further down the hillside. And he needed to know what was happening on the higher ground.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
He needed to be able to call for help, to call for directed artillery fire, to call for reinforcements, for more food and water.
Flags, signals have been tried, all sorts of things. The only really reliable way is telephones. In those days, entailed having a cable strung.
Can you read me? The communication is not working. Why is it not working? Bassett.
Cyril Bassett ran along the ridgeline with 20 kilograms of wire on his back as enemy machine gunners and snipers hunted him down. In just over half an hour, the line that Bassett had just laid out went dead.
Are you there? Are you there? Can you read me?
So Bassett turned around and ran the gauntlet down this ridgeline. He
found the break in the cable and he joined the two ends together. Bassett moved up and down the line, fixing the brakes over and over again. One bullet went through his collar and the other took off his right pocket.
He spends 2 days repairing that line, constantly exposing himself to rifle fire. Malone couldn't have stayed alive for as long as he did and call down accurate artillery fire to break up the Turkish positions, the Turkish attacks, if it hadn't been for Cyril Bassett running along that line and repairing the breaks in the telephone cable.
For his actions on that ridgeline, Cyril Bassett was awarded the Victoria Cross by King George V. That's Cyril, the small man in the middle. Four months later, Cyril was back with his mates, fighting in France at the Battle of the Somme. At the end of the war, he returned to New Zealand, a national hero. Eight years later, Cyril Bassett married Ruth Grant. They had 2 daughters. Beverly is the youngest. She's now 80 and lives in Bowral, south of Sydney. Hi Beverly, I'm Ben. How are you?
Hello, Ben.
How are you going?
They're beautiful.
Yeah, picked you some flowers up there for you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for having us today. When did you come to understand that your father had actually won the Victoria Cross?
Maybe when there were ANZAC Day ceremonies at school, and I was once asked to be at the front of the parade. And that was quite an honour for me.
What is the earliest memory that you have of spending time with your father?
The pleasant evenings we had in the winter time, sitting around the fire and going in and saying goodnight to him before we went to bed, saying our prayers next to him.
What do you think your grandfather's Victoria Cross means to New Zealand?
An ordinary man that went to war, and spur of the moment, he just did his job. He just knew that that's what he needed to do.
Granddaughter Sarah Curry remembers Cyril as a humble and proud man.
Never spoke about the war or anything to us. He used to let us look at his Victoria Cross in his drawer. But I didn't really know from him that this had all happened. I actually think that my grandfather was really proud to have it, even if he didn't say. I think he was really proud to have done that for his country.
Cyril Bassett lived a long life. Here he is on his 90th birthday. But it was also a hard life. For much of it, he struggled with what was known at the time as the effects of the war. Today it's called post-traumatic stress disorder. During his last few days, he got quite ill, didn't he?
He got old and his body just was giving up. Beverly was on her way and she arrived and he died. It was amazing. It was like he was waiting for her. And I just held his hand and his hand fell straight away. And it sounds really dramatic. It fell away and I just knew that he'd gone.
From the uttermost ends of the earth, the New Zealanders came further than anyone to fight and die. He's only a small man, but he's clearly a man with the heart of a lion. So he says, when asked about it, all my mates ever got were wooden crosses. There's almost a sense of him being a little guilty at being singled out for his bravery.
Cyril Bassett was a small man with a big heart. He was brave, determined, a true soldier. His willingness to sacrifice his life to do his job is the definition of the ANZAC spirit. 100 years on, with the blessing of Cyril's family, I've brought his personal war diary back to these sacred shores. handwritten in lead pencil, maps, diagrams, and a heartfelt poem he wrote about coming home. O thou whose name is endless love, listen to a maiden prayer, that he whom we so dearly love may be protected by thy care. Bless him this right wherever he be, in camp or trench or tented plain. Be with him all his journey through, and bring him safely back again.
We have to hold this trench.
Next,
they're coming.
The war hero
Are you being there?
who fought for his country.
He was dreadfully wounded.
Fell in love.
He was apparently very good with the ladies.
But in the end,
he becomes almost a pariah.
Lost everything.
The only way he could provide for her was to die.
This is the place where our next digger earned a Victoria Cross. It's called Hill 60, and a young man from Western Australia became a hero right here. But his experience was unique. Following the war, Hugo Throssell ends up opposing everything he fought for.
Ben, we're now on the summit of Hill 60. By nightfall on the 10th of August, the offensive from ANZAC was over. Shout and Burton were dead. Dunstan and Tubb had been evacuated with wounds. Keysore, Hamilton, Simons and Bassett, miraculously, were still in one piece.
Early on, Hill 60 had little strategic value, but over time, it became an important link between the Anzacs and the British battalions a few kilometres north.
It's remarkable that 2 weeks earlier, Hill 60 had been deserted. And Australian soldiers wandered over it freely, robbing beehives of honey. But by the 21st of August, the Turks had fortified Hill 60 heavily.
It would be Lieutenant Hugo Throssell's defining moment. He was a farmer from Northam in Western Australia. His dad, George, was a politician and for a while, the Premier of WA. Throssell went to Gallipoli with the 10th Light Horse Regiment.
My name's Hugo Vivian Throssell, 31 years old. That makes me one of the oldest blokes here, I suppose. I come from a big family of kids. There's 14 of us all up. And they're all back home on the farm in Western Australia. Except for my brother, of course, Rick. Yeah, we enlisted together.
He was a bit of a lad beforehand, full of fun, a great optimist. He was a great sportsman. He was apparently very good with the ladies. And he went off to the war as a great lark, as a lot of young men did, and thought this was an adventure.
It's an adventure he shared with his brother Rick. They were not only bushies, they were great mates. Younger brother Hugo, by all accounts, was a bit of a lad.
He's got that wicked grin. One of the things that he was famous for in Gallipoli is his sense of humour and using it to keep morale up and sense of optimism in the face of incredible odds.
They're qualities that were much needed on the night of August 29, 1915. On Hill 60, Hugo Throssell's men were about to be put to the test.
The enemy charged across open ground, but they were beaten back. Just when they thought it was over, there was yet another Turkish attack.
The Anzacs, in the blue trenches, were at a great disadvantage. They were below the enemy and needed to reach the higher ground.
Throssell was ordered to take this trench that led 140 metres up to the summit of Hill 60.
All right, men, we have to hold this trench. Build the barricade. Hurry up, men, they're coming!
Throssell himself killed 5 Turks and then helped to build a barricade to stop the counterattack.
Come on, men, faster, faster! Come on, boy! Outstanding work, lads. Get back! coming! Bring on the barricade!
Of the 160 ANZACs that were there that day, only a few remained. Throssell and a few of his mates that were left were desperately outnumbered and copying it from three sides.
They're coming! Rebuild the barricade! This is the perfect death trap! Rebuild it! Rebuild it!
His men worked on rebuilding the barricades yet again, but Throssell fought on. This went on for 7 hours, despite him being badly wounded. It was said he looked as if he'd been in a slaughter. Hugo Throssell was ordered off the battlefield twice, and both times he refused.
Keep going! Rebuild it!
He stays at his position for over 2 days despite very, very dangerous wounds and continues to fight. They hold the position. Without his action, the Australians could not have held Hill 60. He was dreadfully wounded. He spent a long time recovering in hospital. His brother had also been wounded. They spent time in hospital together.
6 months later in London, Hugo Throssell was awarded the Victoria Cross. While he was in hospital, he met and fell in love with Catherine Pritchard. She was an author, a socialist, a founding member of the Australian Communist Party. Their marriage would change him forever.
He comes home to a life where he's celebrated as a hero in Western Australia.
The Throssells appeared happy. They got on with life and started a family. But in 1919, in his hometown of Northam, the local war hero was invited to make a speech.
His views are shaped by hers over that time, there's no doubt about that. He is disillusioned with the war, he's disillusioned with the outcome.
It was a big occasion. Hugo Throssell VC led a parade to mark the signing of the peace treaty. He then spoke, declaring that he was now anti-war and a socialist. Many regarded it as the words of a traitor.
When he made that speech, I think he didn't have any idea of how much of an impact it would have on him. I mean, he was shunned by his family and by a lot of his fellow countrymen. The war has made me a socialist. We shall never be free of wars under a system of production for profit. I want to work for peace because I know and have seen the horror of war.
How did his fellow soldiers react to the speech?
They regard it as treason because there was a strong anti-communist feeling in the country at the time. I think they thought he'd betrayed them.
He becomes almost a pariah. He fails in business, his farm is going bad, the part-time work he's got is drying up. By now, his life is a mess. He quietly leaves a small note saying that he's never recovered from his war experiences, goes out onto the veranda, sits in a deck chair and takes his service revolver and shoots himself.
He killed himself because he felt a failure. He did that so she'd get the war widow's pension. The only way he could provide for her was to die. A pension would take care of her and my dad, who was only 9 at the time.
There is no doubt that Hugo Throssell was a remarkable man, but his efforts at Gallipoli that earned him a Victoria Cross came at a terrible cost. His life had become a living hell, and this proud ANZAC could only see one way out. Coming up...
He's almost a natural-born soldier.
The soldier's soldier, Albert Jacka.
He felt he should lead the way.
Our first ANZAC to be awarded a VC at Gallipoli.
Extraordinary courage.
Looks like it.
Extraordinary valour.
A true national hero.
When the chips are down, Jack is the man that you really want to have by you.
Next, on The Power of 10. The Gallipoli campaign lasted 8 long months. Of the 10 men who were awarded VCs, there is still one to meet. He was regarded as being a soldier's soldier, a man who became a national treasure. His name was Albert Jacka.
I'm Albert Jacka, 22. I'm from Victoria, where I work with my father as a labourer in the State Forest Department. Right, cheers, fellas. Yeah, I have not as well.
Jacka grew up on a dairy farm. He was one of 6 kids
Don't you want your hat?
and always wanted to be the best.
My maiden name was Josephine Jacka, and I'm Albert's niece, and I've now reached the ripe old age of 92, and I'm still with it, if you know what that means.
Absolutely.
Ah, good. Well, he wasn't a tall man, but he was powerful looking, you know, because they'd all been woodcutters with their father and woodcutters by hand. And Albert, he was the eldest of the 3 boys that all went away to war. He felt that he should lead the way.
Ben, this expanse in front of us is Monash Valley. If you haven't been where we are, in May 1915, you would have seen men moving up Monash Valley carrying ammunition, rations, water, and stretcher bearers going the other way, evacuating the wounded.
Dr. Peter Pedersen is helping us find the exact location where Jacka made his mark. And thanks to historian Charles Bean's original maps, we've found it.
Yeah, Ben, this looks like it. Jacka, the 14th Battalion, have come up here to the front line just over the crest.
This was once the most dangerous place on the peninsula. No man's land. The road snakes along the ridgeline between what were the 2 front lines. On the left in the red, the Turkish trenches. On the right in the blue, the ANZAC. The area was known as Courtney's Post. At 4 a.m. on May 19, the Turks opened fire.
It would be a mass human wave attack across no man's land here along this entire ridgeline. Thousands upon thousands of Turkish soldiers. The chanting and the screaming would be deafening, firing themselves up to continue the assault. But wave after wave of Turkish soldier would be cut down. Jacka and his men couldn't see a thing. They were shoulder to shoulder inside a trench that was 2 metres high. The Australian front line was broken in just one place. 2 Australians were killed and 2 were wounded. The Turks had managed to capture a small 10-metre stretch of front-line trench. Albert Jacka was about to be thrust into action. Jacka decided to take the fight back to the Turks. He moved along a communications trench until eventually he got behind the Turks in a position where he could jump up onto the parapet.
He climbed up, sprinted across no man's land and surprised the enemy.
He kills 7 Turks, and he even fires shots at 2 retreating afterwards and claims that he hit them too. And then is found by his officer afterwards trying to light a cigarette and says,
"They got the beggars, sir."
He's almost a natural-born soldier. He's the man who slows the action down in his mind and makes the decision that's pivotal.
Single-handedly, Albert Jacka had accounted for 7 Turks.
And thanks to him, no ground was lost here at Courtney's Post. But the war for Jacka was far from over. After Gallipoli, the Western Front. And again, he put his life on the line and received 2 more awards for bravery.
When the chips are down, Jack is the man that you really want to have by you. It's no surprise at all that the men of the 14th Battalion named themselves Jacka's Mob.
Albert Jacka returned to Australia a national hero.
When he did get home, how did Jacka deal with the war?
Jacka's turned very rapidly into a national recruiting symbol, but he finds that he's on a recruiting poster. He doesn't like people manipulating him. He's got to live with this legend that's been created around him.
After the war, Jacka married Frances Carey, a typist at his electrical goods business. In 1929, he was elected Mayor of St Kilda. 2 years later, after a council meeting, he suddenly collapsed.
It was at the Caulfield Hospital, and to me, he just looked like Uncle Bert sitting up, you know, big and strong. And the thing I was pleased about was he gave me a penny. And I can't tell you what a penny bought you in the way of lollies when I was a child. A lot.
Is that what you did with the penny? You bought lollies?
Oh, absolutely. Couldn't wait to get to the shop next day.
On January 17, 1932, Albert Jacka died of chronic kidney disease.
It's interesting that his spirit never leaves him. It's said the last words he says to his aged father, "I'm still fighting, Dad," whispers this to him from the hospital bed, but passes away at the age of 39, much too young.
Every year, to commemorate Albert Jacka's death, there's a memorial service in St Kilda. And this year, being the Centenary of Gallipoli, was always going to be special.
So today, let's remember Albert Jacka in all his facets. A fearsome, highly decorated soldier, a hero of the underdog, and a compassionate civic leader.
When I think of all the qualities that define the ANZAC spirit, this man had the lot. Albert Jacka VC really was a soldier's soldier. "100 years on. Legends." When we return,
there was nothing ordinary about these men.
Our final tribute to the men who are the power of 10.
Each is a story of extraordinary courage.
These are the Australian VCs of Gallipoli. The Victoria Cross has been awarded to 100 Australians. From the Boer War in the late 1800s through the World Wars, Vietnam and Afghanistan.
Each is a story of extraordinary courage, extraordinary valour and leadership. There was nothing ordinary about these men. Every single story gives us a little bit of an insight into the human qualities to which we all aspire. They were everyday Australians. Everyday Australians like people that are doing their jobs today in different walks of life who answered the call for Australia when the time came.
Today, the War Memorial is home to all our VC medals from Gallipoli. They're all part of a roll call of brave men who fought for both their country and their mates. When you look at these awards, what you see is not solely the recognition of one man's actions. It's the courage tenacity and sacrifice of all those that have served this country. But it will be at Gallipoli where they forge the ANZAC spirit.
Lance Corporal Leonard Keysor, Private John Hamilton, Lieutenant William Simons, Captain Alfred Shout, Lieutenant Fred Tubb, Corporal William Dunstan, Corporal Alexander Burton, Second Lieutenant Hugo Throssell, Corporal Cyril Bassett, Lance Corporal Albert Jacker. These are the Australian VCs of Gallipoli.